I've experienced the far right coming for me, publishing articles around me, lies about me. I've experienced people carry out vendettas against me and lie about me in the media. And I've had various experiences where I've not been able to articulate my response. But the strength in how you choose to respond.
Hi, and welcome to A Class of Their Own podcast, revealing the human stories behind their name. We will hear honest and intimate reflections from our guests who, despite their circumstances, shape a world that reflects their unique visions of success. Join me, Mira Magecha, to learn from these inspirational people and take the first step to make your own change. There are so many cases and so many things that you will have been part of and you will have heard. This isn't the conversation to go, hey, what happened in this case? That we're not going to go into those conversations. But I'm interested in your experience of what you felt, thought, heard, and the journey you went on during that time, and how you felt at various different points and milestones during the stages, because I'm imagining you joined and there's stages that you went through. It wasn't just this whole block of period that felt exactly the same.
No, it was like, I left last year and it's taken me about a year to decompress.
Yeah.
I think that's why I kind of wrote the book, as part of the healing process, to actually understand.
And thank you for the book. It's over here. I can't wait to read it.
Thank you. Thank you. So literally as part of the kind of healing process to understand what happened. So to wind back to 2019, when I joined the organisation, I'm the first Muslim to have held the post that I did. I'm one of the most senior people of colour that was operating in the system, the whole system at that time, and still am, and still have been. But what I came into as this outsider. So I'd followed this path to this point, Mira, where I've always kind of been true to the values, my faith, family, all that stuff. And I'd got to that position by really even giving a very honest interview. If I get the job, I'm going to do it like this. So then the challenge is, when you get a seat at the table, are you actually going to follow that through?
What are you going to do with that seat?
Yeah. What are you going to do with the seat? Either you can conform or you can try. And I made the kind of vow, I'm going to try. I'm going to try and fulfill the mandate that's given to me by statute, by virtue of the service, that I'm there, and around this mandate of trying to improve public confidence in policing, which is a huge thing. How can you do that? But what I learned very early on was that the IOPC didn't have any credibility with many, many people. So when you went out there and you tried to engage, for instance, with communities, most of the time the door would be firmly slammed shut in your face. I know, and I kind of didn't understand that, but when I kind of read into it, when I understood the history, and I got it. Well, why would, these community elders, community groups, these organisations, policing itself, why would they necessarily trust this organisation when it didn't have a track record of credibility? So what I kind of learned was that you cannot get sucked into this rhetoric trap. Going there, being a person in a suit, flapping your mouth, saying these platitudes, it has to be rooted in what you do, in action. So I realised if I'm going to kind of do anything in this space, it's never going to be through what I say. It's going to have to be in what I do. So as much as the doors got slammed in my face, some didn't. So wherever I could, listened. What could we do? I think one of the first pieces of work I kind of vowed we needed to look at a little bit more systemically was around stop and search. It's like a totemic issue in terms of the trust of predominantly kind of young people in black communities in London, but it's decades old.
Yep.
And everybody's heard all the issues before, but as an organisation, we hadn't done anything on this work in this area of kind of toxic to public confidence for a decade. So I did, and I led a piece of work which was around looking at the investigations we had, looking at the evidence base we had, and trying to take the learning from all these really difficult cases and make use our legal powers to make recommendations to the Metropolitan Police on how they can improve stop and search for the communities that they serve. And we made 11 recommendations to the Met, which were eventually accepted. But the way we even did it was different. So traditionally, we would engage with policing stakeholders, because obviously you need that input for it to be credible. Technically, the law, legislation, policing practice. But what we did differently was engage and almost co-produce these with community members, people with lived experience, young people, charities, even academics. And all that came with risk. All that came with me having to kind of make the case consistently and demonstrate my own fact. No, this is the way we need to do it. No, actually, we are going to do it this way. And I learned early on that anything that I was going to bring here was going to entail doing things differently, was going to entail these sorts of kind of different fights, because it's about an element of disruption to try and drive change.
But it's also your personality is what I'm learning.
Maybe, but I don't know any other way to kind of operate. So you're charged with this position. What are you going to do? So I'm going to try and do something. And although it was very difficult to do and there was resistance internally, we did it. You find your allies, you find your way, and you deliver the work. And ultimately, it was work that led to a degree of change and difference. It's for others to judge that. I'm not going to sit here and extol the virtues of anything. But even like years later, even a few months ago, somebody I met spoke to me, and they came from a particular borough in London, and they spoke to me about the impact of the work, how they had used the recommendations we had made, which were on record, to good effect when they were discussing things with the Metropolitan Police. And I get these stories all the time. You don't understand the difference that you make until other people come and tell you, in real life, these things have mattered.
Yeah.
So that was like the kind of first kind of significant piece of work we did. But even in how we kind of engage with communities, really changed, because I started that journey in 2019. But in 2020, the world changed. 2020, COVID hit.
Yeah.
You know, we've all got those memories of us fighting for toilet roll.
Yep, exactly. Which supermarket do you go to get it?
The cheapest one possible. I'm Asian, so I will, every penny a prisoner. Asian, Scottish, it's a terrible combination, but every penny a prisoner. So, I had those fights, but, lockdown. And then a few months later, George Floyd was murdered. And we all watched that lockdown and the footage of it. And then we watched as these Black Lives Matter protests, which didn't emanate from George Floyd, which existed before, but which spread across the world.
Yeah.
And then I was in this role, director for London at the IOPC. I was at a body whose very role spoke to this issue, which was actually, for a brief moment, top of the global news agenda. And I worked for that organisation. And the role, which was always a difficult role, became a really incredibly high profile role. And there was a real, I think everybody has their own memories of George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, and the conversation around race, policing, but also what it meant more generally. They've got their own experience of that. And mine was quite acute because of the organisation and the work that I did, because I was paused and I was waiting for my organisation to get on the pitch, and I was waiting. But like many organisations, it was kind of paralysed by fear.
Yeah.
What do you say? So I think while I was waiting, I just shared the message of my own reflections inside my own organisation, and it kind of went beyond my team. I don't know if an internal email can go viral, but sort of. Got spread beyond my own team. And I shared my own thoughts, what it meant to me as a person of colour, watching that, the daily kind of affronts around racism, the conversations I was having with my children, and how, as a person of colour, even doing the job that I did, how stop and search for me was not an abstract concept, but I was somebody who'd experienced a vehicle stop very recently that couldn't be explained away. Why did they stop my car? Big flash car, why they stopped it. I knew why they stopped it, but I also knew the legislation. So I just did this email to kind of put that out. And then I then became kind of part. There's another way of describing it. I kind of became the face of the IOPC during that period, because I took it upon myself that I am going to go out and I'm going to speak on these issues, because this is the role we have. And if others are not getting onto the pitch, then I'm going to. And, face for radio and all that, I'll accept that. But this was not about vanity. It was about trying to kind of explain and try and demonstrate some sort of leadership in this space and understand what the system in this country was at that time, because we do have a police complaint system. We had that, and I wanted to just try and kind of build awareness of it. And I did my learning very much in the public gaze. I'm not media trained. I couldn't do public speaking at the time I took the role. This is a learned skill that I'm even able to kind of speak to you the way I am today. Still had all those hang-ups of that wee boy that had a stutter. I couldn't do public speaking, so I very much learned on the job.
What choice did you have in your own mind at this point?
The choice is, and the choice is always this, either you can try or you can rest.
And resting for you wasn't a choice?
No, because I always thought that a role like this, you probably only ever get one crack at a role like this, and circumstance, life, timing had placed me in a position where these things had all kind of colluded or kind of happened at the same time, and I kind of happened to be in the epicenter. And you've got a choice. Either you can try your best to affect some sort of change, and it's ultimately always geared towards change, whether it's building awareness of the system or trying to get the message out or trying to kind of build awareness with communities who don't have confidence in policing or the organisation. It was to try, but I mean, there's a reason people don't do media, and there's a people that most people in my organisation didn't do media. It's because it's hard. It's risky. It's an unpopular organisation with a difficult mandate, and doing media in the way that I try to do carries a huge amount of personal risk. But I thought a job like that and the responsibility you carry is worth staking your personal credibility. And while others might not have been willing to do it, I accepted the mantle, because I didn't think it just wasn't right to me that I could just sit there and watch this thing kind of flash past in front of me, when actually I needed to be front and centre. But then also there was the scandals which afflicted the Met really acutely at that time in a really concentrated way, which meant that challenge became kind of doubly kind of almost more concentrated.
Just for context, you're a senior director. Is that the most senior person? No.
So, I'm regional director, full title. So I'm a director there, but there's a couple of rungs above me.
Right.
There's a few rungs above me. So it's perfectly legitimate to expect others to take up the mantle.
Fine.
And I was one regional director among many. But
okay.
Look, it's but if you Google it, unfortunately, my face comes up a lot. But I was out there, and I was trying in different spaces as well.
You've taken a personal risk. And with that personal risk comes people who are willing to troll you, talk about you personally, talk about you in a way that you have to be strong enough, but also open to take, because that's the risk that comes with this. How do you manage, cope? What are some of the experiences that you've personally felt through this period?
It's quite a lot. And so if I focus maybe on the external. So externally, you've got the reaction, the toxic reaction that you get kind of publicly, social media, Twitter. I won't call it by its new name. Twitter. And what I consistently experienced, and even just really recently, is, where I would put out something professionally, what people would go for is, the thing I've said, but accompanying with it would be vitriolic racism. And then also, very kind of sometimes subtle, but then very obviously overt, anti-Muslim hatred and everything that's connected in between. So it was a very thin line between exerting your kind of professional opinion and voice out there to people just crashing in on you and tearing your identity apart.
Yeah.
Now, if my validation ultimately lied in what racists thought of me, what those people that always hated somebody that looked like me and sounded like me thought of me, how could I cope? I couldn't. I don't care. I don't care for what these people say. I've faced down people who have tried to physically maim me. So if people are going to be anonymous, visible on social media and troll me, they can troll me all day long. I don't care. And me not caring, I think, irked a lot of people. Yeah. And it still does, because you cannot affect me. Cannot affect me. The thing I will guard against, though, is my family. My family. But we also kind of develop gallows humour around this, because my children are older now. And so one of the things that, they would occasionally do is to see, how dad had been trolled. And some of the more amusing things I used to get as Father's Day gifts. So, for instance, like one Father's Day,
I'm distraught, but yes, carry on.
No, but so it kind of explains who I am and like how we kind of deal with these things.
Yeah, because you have to deal with them.
So one Father's Day kind of unwrapped it, and my daughter had found something, and she had put it on Father's Day mug for me, and it was thick as a brick, dumb as a rock, which really tickled me. It's quite funny. It's quite funny. So I've still got that Father's Day mug. So look, you develop your gallows humour around this, and then there's the outright hatred. But you can't get me like that. You cannot break me like that, and that will not affect me. But there's also the reality around that. So I've experienced pile-ons. I've experienced the far right coming for me, publishing articles around me, lies about me. I've experienced people carry out vendettas against me and lie about me in the media. And I've had various experiences where, I've not been able to articulate my response. But the strength in how you choose to respond. So there is a thing absolutely about like looking like me, sounding like me, trying to lead like me. In public life, what does that mean? In public life, and I'm not like a politician, I happen to be this public servant who did this high profile job. And what I learned is that there is outright hatred in certain sections of society for somebody who is Muslim and who is Pakistani, and who unapologetically owns their space.
And you do unapologetically.
I do. So you control me all day long. I don't care. I'll always protect my family, but my validation doesn't lie in what you think. Not bothered. My validation lies in the people, in those people's opinions who matters. So when I've been trying to do the work, to those people who are affected by it, to the people I love, to the people that matter, their opinion matters to me. So ultimately, Mira, that will be what it's be, whatever. I'm not going to say it's nice. I'm not going to say it's fine, because I think where we are now societally, there's just a shrug and an acceptance. This is what you get. But not everybody gets this.
Yeah.
If you're of colour or you're of difference, then it seems to be, this is what you get. Until we move past that point of societal acceptance, you need to have a different conversation. But right now, it seems to just be an accepted norm. There's a normalisation of it. But hey ho, here we are. We push through. Then there's the other kind of side of it. The kind of resistance you get at a systemic level. So I dealt with the Metropolitan Police. My experiences there were, it's an organisation that is very, very skilled It's you've got to remember the time I dealt with it. By the time I left, the Baroness Casey report had then got published actually at the point I left, and I contributed to that report as well. It was an institution that was a master of kind of pushing different narratives of denial, of resisting scrutiny, and I detail what that kind of looked like through how they pushed against it. But I expected it. And here's the thing again, and I'm very conscious of this because I'm seeing it in the interview. People will paint you into a box, say, look, you're anti-policing. No, because, and it's really interesting because some of the experiences I had is that I dealt with as many kind of victims and people with difficult experiences with policing who were in the community as I did who were serving inside policing itself, whether that was the Metropolitan Police Service or outside of it. And to this day, I have more contacts with police officers, whether they're serving or current, than I do of my former organisation. And they're still in touch. Yeah. And that kind of speaks probably to how I approach the work. So the resistance I expected from the Met, I expected it. It's part of their kind of MO, and that's what they were going to do. But it was never something I was going to cede to. It was never anything I was going to be influenced by. But certainly my organisation struggled to kind of cope with the power and influence of the Metropolitan Police.
What led you to leave?
Probably the point I was going to get to. My biggest challenge in the system was my own organisation.
Okay.
What I experienced in the organisation when I pushed, because I spoke about one piece of work I did, but everything that I kind of did in that period from 2019, but 2020 onwards until I left last year involved a fight. And fighting as you do for change and these really difficult cases and things which might engender change, my lifetime would prepare me for it. But what my vanity and my ego hadn't prepared me for was the cost of it. And I experienced some really difficult things that I didn't have a sense of how difficult they were when I was in it, because I was in the storm. And when in the storm, you're just trying to get to the end.
Right.
You're wrapped up and you're buffeted and you're just trying to crash through. And I experienced people trying to kind of break me from underneath, break me from up top, and things then crashing in either side. And I was like the proverbial kind of jam in that sandwich. And as I said, I didn't know how hard that was until I started speaking about my experiences afterwards. And I eventually got to the point after everything I went through, and I suffered. And I don't say that lightly, because speaking about these things, I've had to confront things around mental health. I've had to confront things about I've had to confront things through a lens of vulnerability. That's not been easy, because that's not something really I've spoken about. I'm of a certain age, I'm of a certain culture where you don't really speak about these things, but I confronted it when I wrote. And when it was all laid bare, there's no other way to describe it, but there was people in, you can describe it in a multitude of ways. Either it was people in the organisation that tried to break me, or the organisation itself was trying. And I detail kind of those experiences there. And that had costs for me at different times. It definitely affected my mental health. And there was a period where I was off work, but I came back. And when I came back fighting. And I came back and I led a piece of work, which was around Operation Houghton and Charing Cross Police Station, which became this massive story and kind of led this kind of call for change around policing culture and became this global news story. I came back fighting, but I didn't realise then, but my cup was nearly empty.
This episode is brought to you by Play for Change. Play for Change brings together leadership coaching, expert facilitation, and builds communities. They help craft real connections, spark learning, and turn play into powerful experiments to enable better relationships with yourself and others around you. To find out more, go to playforchange.co.uk. Links are in the show notes below. There's only so much you can take, and at some point, you have to put the brakes on for your own sanity and your own self and your own family, because otherwise it could lead to who knows what. And so...
Yeah. So I reached a point where I knew I wasn't right. I knew there was something wrong. And I started speaking to my wife about it. And we started talking. I said, I'm going to leave. I'm just going to resign. I've had enough. I don't have anything left. And there's this word that I use, and it's interesting because I've spoken to many people and they also describe this phrase, I'm exhausted. And people get exhausted through the repetition of the fight and whatever that fight is and whatever system they're trying to do. And my fight was inside my own organisation. And I'd got to this point where I kind of was just trying to put the foot on the pedal and there was nothing left.
Yeah, there was no gas.
And so I walked away. I walked away from the organisation. I walked away from the work. And even walking away, even when I resigned, it was a horrible experience because I couldn't even be allowed the dignity of resigning because, for instance, I was constructing my goodbye email because I wanted to try and get the message out to many of the amazing people that I worked with. Because I said, my experiences are complicated. It's not just the organisation was X or Y.
Yeah.
You're dealing with a complicated set of experiences. And there were so many amazing people I worked with. So I wanted to craft this message. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought, what if this message is leaked? Goes out public? I don't know why I thought that. And do you know what happened? On my last day, somebody sent it to a journalist. And then BBC Newsnight was running a story that apparently I was going and they were inferring it was something to do with a story they'd ran about me, some lies somebody had spoken about me. Again, covered. I speak about that. But on my last day, when I was walking away from a system that had ultimately nearly broken me, I felt broken. I felt broken at that point. People in my organisation my organisation thought they'd just try and finish the job, and it became a news story. And that was my goodbye from that organisation. That email got leaked, splashed across Twitter, speculation, none of it true. My right of reply? Nothing.
But I suppose it gave you, if you had any single doubt, it closed that bit of doubt that you were making the right decision at that time for yourself.
I mean, it makes for a good story now. When you're trying to
of course,
when you're trying to recount the experience, it kind of bookends it perfectly in terms of the experiences. Now, it's for my former organisation to digest my experiences, and my hope would be that they digest it with an open mind to prevent this from happening to anybody else. Do I expect anything? Do I expect I don't expect anything. I don't want anything, to be honest. I'm speaking about what it was like for me, the person that I am, through the lens that I am, and through my identity, because it's all interrelated.
Of course.
This idea of racism, I come back to Sir William Macpherson's definition of institutional racism. And there's a bit in it around people always hang on to the kind of more obvious parts of it, you know, the system and stuff, but there's a bit around thoughtlessness. Thoughtlessness is a criteria which can establish what institutional racism can look like. Now, I'm not saying, I cannot say that my former organisation falls into that bucket, but what I can say is the multitude of experiences that I had, you know, there's a combination of experience there which show me that racism was a factor, racial bias was a factor, because whatever lens I was put through, whatever experience I had was harsher, was different. The standards I was held to was different, whether that was externally, but internally, how people came at you whether that was through the lens of professional jealousy or just unable or an inability to accept that somebody like me could possibly make a decision that that didn't agree with them, that could be different from them. You know, there was a multitude of experiences, but this idea of what racism looks like, you know, in 2024 it's very different from the racism I experienced as a child and as a young man, where I was able to confront it. And as hard as it is to kind of be in a situation where somebody's wielding a machete at you, I'll tell you what's easier, because I can see it and I can deal with it, and they will understand what it will take to kind of take me down. Here, the racism that we are afflicted with, that sort of discrimination that so many people kind of suffer from, is nuanced. It's kind of gaseous. You can't pin it down, but I tell you what, you can articulate it if you try hard enough.
Yeah.
Because one of the things you can say is, look at the accumulation of your experiences. Did everybody experience it that way? Were you treated differently? You know, it's an instructive question to ask.
A reflection as I'm sitting here is, you have articulated yourself in a way that other guests, other conversations, other experiences previous or in life that I've had outside of this podcast haven't managed to do. And that's in a way where you're very respectful, but you're honest. And often those two are really difficult to do.
Really?
Often, yes. Talk to me about the last year and the process and why you chose to write your book and the meaning behind the name.
It's really interesting. So when I left Mira, I didn't understand fully the position I was in. But looking back, I was broken. I was broken. And I needed to heal. And writing the book, and I'm careful because I don't want to go into cliche, but writing the book was a process of healing. It was a process of catharsis.
Yeah.
And it started off as one book, this idea of a book of recanting experiences, and it became a totally different type of book by the time I'd finished, because I didn't understand what it was that I'd been through until I literally got to each chapter, each stage, each phase. And then I look back, and sometimes the things were unfolding in front of me, even as I was writing the book. So, you know, there was a case that followed me for 4 years where I'd been the victim of a witch hunt, and I ended up in court. And I literally had my day in court where I was able to kind of exonerate myself. And that happened as I was writing the book. So I was literally able to write the chapter as I was doing it. So the book's called like True North, a story of racism, resilience and resisting systems of denial. And what I wanted to do was, for the first time, just try and provide insight into a system which is pretty closed off, as kind of stitched in defensiveness. And I think sometimes people approach it with sometimes what can be perceived as an axe to grind. I don't have an axe to grind. I try and I've been balanced in my kind of portrayal, because the book is about my life from where I grew up to how I am to where I've been. And the premise of the book is, you know, how do you kind of lead with your true north? You know, do you understand it? You have to kind of understand it to lead with it, your values, what that is, what makes you. And then I've tried to show how I did it. And I'm this bang average guy, right? I use that phrase very consciously and deliberately, because I want people to understand that this thing is not exclusive to certain people. It's available to everybody and anybody. And I've met so many people that have sold their souls when they've got to the top table. And we all know them, whether that's in professional life, corporate life. And I didn't want to do that. But I've also written the kind of story as a cautionary tale, because it's all well and good trying to be the tip of the spear, but there's a cost to it. And I want people to avoid the pitfalls that I had. So there's many things that I've rooted this in. So I speak about the glass cliff. I speak about glass ceilings, the class ceiling, concrete ceiling. I root some of the lessons that I've learned in academia, like the imposter syndrome and how I think it's a load of bollocks. I've come back to key concepts and I've kind of threaded them through the book. But the main point was that I had this kind of unique set of experiences, and I felt like I kind of lived a decade in a space of a few years. I suffered, I speak about grief, bereavement. I speak about mental health. I speak about all these things that people don't maybe speak about when it's just about the gloss.
Yeah.
And although like I'm quite prominent on LinkedIn, which I have a problem with, I'm always on it. I wanted people to understand, well, if you want to try and drive change, it is possible. But also, why is it so hard? And how can you do it? But also just be careful. So that this is my attempt, just to try and share the story with a view to try and provide insight to others.
It's been, for me, sitting on the other side, a really reflective conversation today, which I've thoroughly enjoyed. We started this conversation with, who is Sal? Going back round, based on what you've talked about, is there anything you would change or add?
I think there'll be some people who will kind of judge me for the work that I did. And I think all I would say is, if you can, maybe just kind of read the story and understand what it's like, because as much as I'm kind of put into boxes and positioned by certain people in certain ways, it's not like that. And my story has been of somebody, just this bang average guy who's tried to drive the change that he could through the levers that he had. And I've just tried to show others that they can all be change makers in their own way. It's not a skill set that's exclusive to anybody. Because if somebody like me could do the few things that they could, anybody can.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
If you enjoyed that conversation, please share A Class of Their Own podcast with your friends and family. Subscribe, follow and like. It really helps us continue to grow. Keep being you through connection, learning and play. You are a class of your own.